button in here, Richard.
The button is there. We're getting it over there.
Yeah, this is a brand spanking new.
That's great.
December.
Thank you, December.
Rednecks who couldn't support you at all came up feeling that they could, but you were hitting working class issues, heavy and hard. I hope you continue.
Hey, thank you very much. I want you to support me. Thank you. Former highway commissioner. What is that? Now that's a lot to kind of understand. Thank you. Ricky, how are you? In pretty good shape, too. What are you doing? Are you working out? Yeah, you can. Yeah, looks good. I have to work out. All right. Good. Chris Johnson. Hey, Chris, how are you? Nice to see you.
Man, it was their office.
Nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Great. Very nice to see you. Nice to see you.
And you're with,
You take all these names, Jeff?
I know.
Yeah, we're just going to listen to everybody. Everybody was sure. Thank you.
California.
You are. You're building missiles. Are you building logic? What are you building?
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Wait, there it goes. Patricia, how are you? Yeah. Pleasure to be here. Hope you'll help. We have to help. You've answered all the right questions. Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Great.
Good to see you again.
Senator Brown? Hopefully? Yeah. How are you? Hope?
I don't know. Real energetic.
Well, nice to see you. Real what?
Energetic.
Yeah. Great. Pleasure to meet you.
40-year long time ago.
Well, don't.
The early 70s.
Well, let's not stop.
I know your dad very well.
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you. Very nice to meet you. Well, how are you? Hi. Hi. Nice to meet you. Sure. Right here. Where's the picture? You have a... Thanks. Hi. What's for the city council? Hi. Hi. How you doing? Very nice to meet you. Michael, remember you? Hey, Michael. All right. Earlier campaigns, long time. That's great. That's cool.
You have to be eligible.
All right, maybe. Sure. One of these days I will. It's Murphy.
Una foto con Ana.
Very nice to see you.
Here. You want to take a picture of me?
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Let me introduce you to these computers. Hello. Ben, how are you? There's the man I know. You bet. How you doing, Jerry? Hey, how are you? Good. Good to see you, Bart. I told Bart I was going to see you. They said say hello to you. Good. You got your office down here.
Our headquarters DVD.
Nice to see you. Hello.
Brown, I met 10 years ago, and you borrowed 20 cents from me to my telephone call at the Fairmont. 20 cents you borrowed, and I asked your dad for his phone, and I never got it back.
I'll give you a tip. Okay, this is Tony Castillo.
See, this is GI Forum, Rich.
He did. One more, don't get over there. One more. Hurry up. Are you from Brazil?
Did you from Ohio?
Thanks.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
Another candidate.
I brought a picture, an old picture that I'd like to show you when we were at the Fairmont Hotel right there.
91.
About 19, no, during your first term with Alex
That's
Escobar.
not 91. This was
No, no,
earlier. I was
That's
a yep.
1979, I think, with Alex Escobar. Remember?
Yep, that was a little thinner in that day. I can tell.
Right.
Definitely thinner.
Baggy pants, fashion,
Baggy pants. Yeah, I know that. How's Alex?
It's fine, it's fine.
Jerry, I want to tell you my mother is 77 years old and she'll vote for you for buying it.
Great, thank you very much. I didn't take your paper, did I?
Okay, thank you.
So we got it.
Oh,
Sure.
speak to it.
Okay. Hello,
Governor.
nice to see you.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
What's your name?
Eva?
Ava. Nice to meet you. I'm Eugene. Jonathan. Eugene. Yes.
Carolyn is here.
Hi, Carol.
Brown, how are you?
Finance Committee of the Democratic Party, at one point, Father Rubio.
Okay.
Is that what that was? Yeah. Well, tell me what it is. Why? Pretty. Like you. Me. What should I say? Say Linda. Kiwi.
L-I-N. We need one more picture. Wait.
Okay, come on.
Come on, Maria.
Good button. I don't know where it's from.
Glad to meet you. I admired your picture and I admired your service to our government. You should have stayed in there. I stayed in my last name.
On the wall up there?
Yes, I think that is beautiful. It says something to me.
Well, good. Put a little color in that.
Yeah, I know. It's so good meeting you.
Thank you.
And this is my daughter-in-law, the first gift.
We're very happy to have this, our distinguished speaker, who Pete Carrillo will introduce later on, to talk about redistricting. But before we get into that, I'd like to make a few comments and introduce a few people. My name is George Shirakawa. I'm the city councilman from District 7. And thanks to the work of the Mexicano community and others, we won elections. So I do want to formally thank the Hispanic community for raising a lot of money for helping us get elected in District 7. So let me tell you tonight we're going to talk about redistricting, in particular Governor Brown who was the last governor in charge of redistricting. Why is it important to us as a community? It's important because 4 city council races will be coming up in a year and a half from now. We need to make sure that the redistricting that occurs is going to be of benefit to our community. So we need to stay vigilant and keep up to date. And luckily we have Joaquin Luna, who is the leading voting rights and expert in the United States here to help us. Again, we also have county redistricting. The Latino Issues Forum was very instrumental in letting our wishes known of how we need to see the county supervisors, 5 districts divided in Santa Clara County. We need to start thinking about the state redistricting, in particular the Assembly, Senate seats. We have already been in discussion with Salinas and Watsonville to make this a reality. We need to start thinking about a congressional seat for Mexicanos. We need to start thinking in the future years after Governor Brown about United States Senate. So before we get started, and I turn it over to Pete Carrillo, the president of Latino Issues Forum, I need to introduce some people here. Did Trixie Johnson or Joe Head show up? No. Supervisor Ron Gonzalez, where are you, Ron, please? Alquist, our own Blanca Alvarado is here. School board members from Alum Rock, Joaquin Luna, 19, Local 1877, the San Jose firefighters, and we also have Delia Alvarez, the Director of Public Health, the highest Latina Chicana in county government. Where's Delia? All right, Delia. Now let me introduce the potential candidates for City Council. We have Ben Menor. I also have Maria Elena Chavez from District 8. And let me introduce you to Pete Carrillo, who needs no introduction.
Thank you, George, and I really appreciate that introduction. And I really want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us today. When I got here around 5 o'clock, we had about 20 or 30 people, and I was really surprised. And I'm really happy that all of you really took the time to be out here with us today. I wanted to talk a little bit, very, very briefly, before we introduce our special guest, about what we've been doing with the Latino Issues Forum. We started in 1987, and I see that Dr. Flores is here from Fresno. He was one of the founders. Dr. Valdez, also a founder, along with many other folks in this room, also with Councilwoman Alvarado and Councilmember George Shirakawa and Supervisor Ron Gonzalez. We didn't know what we were starting in 1987, I don't think, and many of us were trying to figure out exactly what the Latino Issues Forum was going to be doing. But I think that this year, or at least in the last couple of years, we started to focus our attention on some real critical issues. This year, we've worked really hard at redistricting. Some of you, probably all of you, know about our efforts with respect to the county of Santa Clara. We urged them in 1989 or 1990 to form a task force, the first time that it had ever been done in this county and in the state of California, actually, to the best of my knowledge, and probably in the nation, to open up their process instead of drawing the lines as they did in 1981 by having the senior planner come around to each member of the board's office and ask where they wanted the lines to be drawn. This year we've had an extremely open process, and we've had some good people on that redistricting committee that has really paid attention to the concerns of the Latino Issues Forum. The city's process is underway. It's going to be completed relatively shortly. We have a great chairman in the person of Rich Garcia. I don't know if he's here today, but we have Angel Rios, who's on that commission as well, Ray Villarreal, George Sanchez. All are working extremely hard to make sure that the interest of the Latino Chicano community, and in fact the interests of the minority communities, are taken into consideration and not just paid lip service. We have a hearing that we requested of the Assembly Elections and Reapportionment Committee coming up on June the 11th. That's going to be a critical date for us to make sure we have folks out there and make sure that we have our plans prepared in time. In that regard, I also wanted to mention a person who has been extremely valuable to the Latino Issues Forum. Somebody who worked tremendously hard for the last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years now. Virtually, I think we gave him $250, was it, Bill, that we gave one of our consultants to do our Political Empowerment Task Force report, and that is Joaquin Avila, and I think he's here, and his staff is here. Joaquin? I can say that without a doubt, if we did not have Joaquin Avila and his staff to be part of our effort, we would have had a lot more problems with the city, a lot more problems with the county, and a lot more problems with the state. But his mere presence in association with us and his mere presence in meetings, I think sways a lot of votes. And indeed, and I think 2 or 3 weeks ago when the county did their final voting, it was on a 7-6 vote. And one of the members who I didn't think was going to vote, I think voted the right way, in large part because of what Joaquin Avila had mentioned during that public hearing. So I really tip my hat off to him, and if it wasn't for him, I don't think we would be in the good shape we are with respect to redistricting. We've got some other efforts in the process. Our education task force is going to be meeting here in this building on Saturday and start to develop some initiatives, some projects, hopefully ending in October with a conference on education. I don't know exactly what aspect of education we're going to take, but I'm very, very confident in the chair, Jorge Gonzalez, and one of the other leaders in the Ed Task Force, Bob Gonzalez Jr., who I think are going to do a great job, and you're going to hear a lot more about what they're doing in the next couple of months. Let me now introduce our honored guest, and it's a tremendous honor for me because it's somebody that I've admired since I first came here in, I think it was June the 21st, 1974, from Phoenix, Arizona. It's a person that I think led the way to a large extent in terms of making sure that minorities and women were indeed part of the governmental process. He led the way in terms of making sure that Hispanics were in visible positions, like the Secretary of Health and Welfare, Mario Bledo, I don't know if they call them secretaries or directors of the Department of Motor Vehicles. He's made numerous judicial appointments. He signed the landmark legislation, the Agricultural Relations Board, I think that's what it was called, in 1975 or 1976. He's been a person that, in my judgment, has not just paid lip service to the minority communities, and in particular to the Latino, Chicano, Hispanic community. His record reflects it. We have Highway Commissioner Jack Brito, who was appointed by Governor Brown way back when, a couple of years ago, is an indication of at least Governor Brown's commitment to our community. So without any further ado, let me introduce former Governor Jerry Brown. He'll always be my governor, Jerry Brown. Thank you very much.
Now, one thing Duke Magian would never do is appoint Joaquin Brito to anything. Because he gave me so much hell, I don't think I'd appointed to anything either. No, he did a very good job as highway disturber and commissioner and protector of freeways and defender of Adriana Gianturco. Anyway, I just want the record to show that the former governor, whose name can barely be remembered, built less roads in his best year than we built in our worst year. Interesting, isn't it? By the way, talking about not remembering who that fellow was for 8 years, this has become a Republican strategy. It's not an accident that being unmemorable is now a very important qualification to run for office and to remain in office. I gave being interesting a bad name. People have discovered that if there's not too much they can really remember, it's easier to change your image in time for the next election based on whatever the polls may tell you at that time. And if you're really dull, not only can people not really pin too much on you, and your commercials can reinvent you every election depending upon what new issues may emerge, but if you can really run a dull campaign or one that's full of lots of negative advertising, you'll depress the turnout. Less people will vote. And when less people will vote, it won't be a representative withdrawal from the electorate. It will be a not voting based on how young you are, how many years of college you have, how much income you have, whether you own your home or not. Those are the people that tend to vote, and those who haven't had all the advantages tend not to vote because things aren't working for them. So dullness, besides being pretty boring, and that it is an intentional strategy to maintain the bankrupt policies that really don't serve the people, and if there was a full turnout at the election, would never be validated every 4 years as they have been in this state and throughout the country. I don't think it's an accident that the organizations that empower people are being systematically undermined. I refer to organized labor. Why is it that the trade union movement loses its tools, what it needs to really be effective in its organizing of people? And then, at the same time, of course, people vote less. There's less representation and advocacy for ordinary working men and women in this country. I don't think it's an accident that labor has been weakened. It's an intentional strategy to weaken the rights of the American people, to further entrench the privileged elites that are in control and are really doing a miserable job. But they're doing a clever job at distorting and manipulating the process. The same is also true of the political parties. The tools that are needed by a political party are no longer there. The parties are a shell of themselves. They don't have the organization. They don't have the tools, really, to empower people. And what democracy has become, it's a shadow of itself. It's hard to even call it a democracy when half the people don't participate. When Abraham Lincoln was facing the withdrawal of half the states of the Union, he said and defined the struggle as proving that popular government, that is government of the people and by the people and for the people, was not an absurdity. Well, today as we speak, that is still a very open question. Is government of the people an absurdity or is it a reality? Well, instead of half the states withdrawing, we have half the people individually pulling out of the electoral process because they see so little there that it's going to do anything for them. And that's a tragedy, because what it does is it reinforces powerlessness and further entrenches those who have irresponsibly taken this country down from its great heights under Democratic presidents and even Republican presidents in former eras. And what we see is a financial system in various states of collapse, a political policy that cares more about people 10,000 miles away than it does in the neighborhoods in which Americans live, that would rather give money to stop violence, or rather to create violence in El Salvador, than to stop it in San Jose. And that's a government that doesn't belong in there. We have school districts that are laying off teachers because they can't pay loans back to the state, and we have a government in Washington that is forgiving billions of loans to foreign countries that don't even have any responsibility for our people. Doesn't make any sense at all. There's not enough money for schools, but there's enough money to give $300 million to Afghanistan, so one group of Muslims can kill another group, even though the Russians left 2 years ago. What's the point? In fact, now they're beginning to wonder what the point is because of the 5 tribal groups that the Reagan and Bush administration support. 3 of them endorsed the work of Saddam Hussein. So they feel pretty stupid, but it hasn't stopped them from applying money, nor has it stopped them from giving $60 million a year to Angola, to have one group of Angolans kill each other over the last 10 years, and to give $1 billion in El Salvador alone. For what? Has there been any peace? Has there been any democracy? Has there been any improvement in the quality of life? And just this morning, I heard on the radio that Bush released another $32 million, and they haven't yet brought to justice the murderers of 6 Jesuits and their 2 housekeepers. I think that's a disgrace and a scandal that should not go unrecognized and uncondemned. Yeah, we get ticker tape parades, and we see the popularity rating going up 30 points, but really, what have we got? What have we got? Saddam Hussein is still in power. He's got half his tanks. He's got 2/3 of his airplanes. And now we have a president, and we have a Congress, in many parts, at least the Republican half of it, that is advocating giving a special trade preference to China. And now China, after having sold Scud missiles to Iraq, which killed Americans, is now selling even better Scud missiles to Syria. And they're as bad a dictatorship as they were in Iraq. And not only that, but they took over another country called Lebanon, right in the middle of the Iraq War. Nobody said anything. So what did we get? 5 million refugees? 100,000 people died? Yeah, they weren't our people, but they were people. 20% of them were Christians. The rest were Muslims, but they're all human beings. 10 to 15,000 were killed after the war was stopped, as far as we can tell, and now hundreds of thousands of little children are at risk, and disease and starvation, and 5 million refugees created, and the basic problems in that area of the world no better solved than they were when the thing started, and we're using more foreign oil today than we're using then. So where's that getting us? I mean, why aren't we putting our money into making this country strong and independent and more self-reliant? If we took the $60 million, the money that came from Japan and Germany and ourselves and other countries, and put it into developing another source of energy and fuel instead of being addicted to foreign oil, we'd not only clean up our own environment, we'd create more jobs, we'd strengthen our economy, and we wouldn't have to go to those wars. That's what we ought to do, and we're not doing that. And we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it as long as this reigning philosophy is. It's just that, you know, it's the Adam Smith and neoclassical economics. It's just let the maximum profit dictate everything. The market. It's kind of like a closet dictator that has to determine everything, even if it results in the weakening of this country. And we know that when you're sending $40 to $50 billion a year out of the country to buy oil, that is making us weaker. And we are now, from being the biggest creditor, the lender to the world, we're now the world's biggest debtor. And that didn't happen under Democrats, it happened under Bush, and it happened under Reagan. That's who it happened under. So while they cry strength, they create weakness. And in the very moment that the high-tech weapons were landing on Baghdad, this country was losing strategic industry to Japan. And the next time we have to go to one of those wars, we're going to have to get permission to use the technology we no longer are capable of producing. And that's not strength, that's weakness. I say it's betrayal of this American tradition. And that's what's going on, nothing less than that. So you ought to think about that when these people come and tell you who is for strength and who is for weakness. And if you look at the financial system, it's an utter scandal what is going on. Neil Bush, the son, he gets away with millions of dollars of ripoff. And Sununu gets a limousine to go up to New York to buy rare stamps. That's the arrogance of these people. They don't give a damn because they think they have a lock on the election because they can make manipulatory ads that turn people's minds and distract people from the real issues. And the process itself is really facilitating that kind of an outcome. Because instead of dialogue and debate
and free discussion. We have a very decayed system of democratic process today. What is it? How do campaigns work? They work this way. They don't work about having debate, Lincoln-Douglas debates where people went around and had long, extensive discussions about the issues. No, what they are is they're endless, mindless quests for big campaign contributions to buy meaningless, manipulatory TV spots. And even the most significant areas of national life are now subordinated to campaign technology. The great civil rights debate, the Civil Rights Bill of 1991. What was the debate? The debate was about quotas. The Republicans said the Democrats want to impose quotas. And the Democrats, what do they say? All right, we're going to put a provision in the law that says this bill outlaws quotas. And in our television spots, we're going to say any Republican who voted against this bill voted for quotas because they failed to vote against the bill that outlawed them. And that was the issue. Whose TV spots fighting quotas would be the most effective? And a year and a half later, of course, what would happen is the Republicans would run a spot saying the Democrats are for prejudice and for quotas, and the Democrats would run a spot and say we had a bill to outlaw quotas, and therefore the Republican is for quotas. And then they would go to meetings and bemoan the empty, meaningless quality of the campaign. But they would keep their television spots running. Now, look at that. What happened? The debate was not about affirmative action. It was not about righting the wrongs of this society. It wasn't about removing the burdens that stand in the way of women, of minorities, of those who have been systematically excluded. That was about technique. They missed the whole point of how to really get to the heart of the matter, and to really get underneath what the issue is, that wasn't even discussed. And the real issue is that the communities, the middle class and the lower middle class and those who are struggling to keep their head above water, this part of America is being systematically undermined by the policies that have been enacted over the last 13 years. And unless they're reversed, then all the civil rights bills in the world aren't going to do any good, because you can't affirmatively advance someone who hasn't had the training and the opportunity and the educational opportunity to make his or her contribution. And what it's really about, it's about the decisions of how we spend our national resources. That's the real underlying issue. And if you look at this empty process, what has happened to our democracy? What's happened to the system? What goes on? It's fundraising. What do they say to run for the Senate in California? You have to have $18 million. $18 million. That means if you get elected, your first job is to start doing your fundraising. And you have to raise $10,000 every single day. You maybe take Sunday off in 2 weeks. That gives you 300 days a year. You can raise $3 million a year. 6 years later, you got $18 million. That's your job. You're a fundraiser. And government becomes a cover story for fundraising activity. You think they're representing you. Well, maybe you don't think they are. You think, but they are really constrained and pressured to sit on the telephone. And now to run for office, you need more of the qualities of a telemarketer than you do a statesman. You have to be good on the telephone. If you can sit there for 5 hours a day getting your $1,000 contributions, then you can buy the TV spots, and then you can maybe have a chance to win. That's what it's about. And what's so insane about that is the airwaves belong to you. And they're licensed by our government solely in the public interest. So how can it be in the public interest that this marvelous technology, that the public airways that are held as a national trust are auctioned off to the highest bidder, and are the means by which our entire government is turned over to the relentless, ceaseless pressure to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars? Now, under that kind of a regime, how in the world are you ever going to get economic justice? How are you ever going to get a shift in the focus that has been so distorted over the last 10 to 15 years? And when I say distorted, look at the numbers. Look at what the Fortune 400 richest individuals, how well they've done. They have trebled their net worth. You know what that means in real dollars? 400 rich individuals and families have started with 90 billion and they advanced to 270 billion. Now that's real money. That tax program worked. Reaganomics really worked for those guys. That's what's happened. And what happened to the people at the bottom 20%? The bottom 20% lost 25% of their share of after-tax income. So what's happened? What's happened is that literally the system is sucking the lifeblood, income, capital, hope out of the poorest neighborhoods of this country. And then when people out of desperation resort to the kinds of crime and drug selling and all the other things that are rising, then they say, okay, we'll take care of that. So what do? 15 new prisons in this state, 10 billion more on the way, the only damn housing program these people have. Prosecutors as judges, the Supreme Court eroding one right after another. One right after another. You run a family planning clinic, you can't even mention what is a constitutional right of privacy of every woman in this country. You can't even mention it. They can protect our morals from topless dancers, but they can't protect the women in this country in the integrity of their own bodies. That's the sad commentary on what we've got, and it's going to get worse with Justice Thurgood Marshall resigning. And then when you see the senators, many in our own party, they put this guy Souter on. They didn't even ask him what his position was. And it's not just in areas like personal privacy. It's on employment. It's on a whole series of matters that deter searches. Now the police can go on a bus and search people at random. So walk on, it's okay. You're on a bus anyway. The kind of people that those judges talk to, they don't ride buses anyway. I mean, just look at what's happening. The erosion of rights, the proliferation of prisons, the appointment of only prosecutors to the bench, and now you can't even work for the Attorney General's office unless your thinking conforms to the orthodoxy of the present incumbent Attorney General. Unless you take a pledge that you are for executing people, you can't even work in the civil division. What an amazing statement that is. What an amazing inversion of the rights of privacy, of free speech, of an individual to serve in the state service of our time. It's hard to believe what's going on. And what I am most concerned about is this erosion of opportunity. It's continuing, and instead of being identified for what it is, it's being covered over in a continuous assault on civil liberties and the rights of people and the rights of trade union members. I signed a bill giving farm workers the right to organize, the right to represent themselves, and Duke Majan came along and he utterly gutted the bill and literally turned it over to the employer community in violation of the law and the spirit in which that measure was enacted. And that doesn't really help. To keep people impoverished does not make for better schools, it doesn't make for better families, it doesn't make for a better future. And that is really what is at stake here. We have a president who likes to spend more time on the telephone talking to his buddies in Europe and the other foreign diplomats, out of which he hopes to keep his unnatural popularity even higher than it is. But when it comes to building a solid strength and community and opportunity for his own people, where is he? He's not there. And so much of the opposition isn't there either. And that's the problem today, because when we speak of the impaired and disintegrating processes of democracy, it's not only that the TV ads are all that we mostly get, but to get on that television, you've got to get the big money. You have to get checks at $1,000 a piece. When you run a campaign, a normal, traditional campaign, if you can't be assured of at least $50,000, you don't go to that meeting. And people who can write you a check for $1,000 are in the top 1%. That's where they are. Now remember, it's the top 1% who increased their share, they doubled it. While most everyone else either stagnated or dropped down. And I say most everyone else, I mean 80% of the American people. We're talking the middle class, we're talking poor people, we're talking most Americans are suffering in the effort to transfer up as much income and wealth to fewer and fewer people. And those people who are now the gatekeepers of public discourse are the ones in charge. Because if you want to be a serious candidate, you must be on the tube. And you can't get on the tube unless you get the permission of the very people whose reign and control has to be overthrown. That's the problem. So how in the world can you ever change this thing? And don't ask for speeches to be covered. What happens now today in politics, with all due deference to the media that happens to be here, if you want to make a point, you don't give a speech anymore. What you do is you make a commercial. And you don't even have to show up to the press conference. You can send your media man or media woman, and they run the commercial. And then the paper writes a story about the commercial. Remember seeing those little stories where they analyze the commercials? This is all about TV spots. So it's not only that they don't tell you anything, it's not only that to get them, you've got to mortgage yourself to a fraction of the people, but the forums that might allow you to have a debate and the give and take barely exist anymore. They're just not part of the process. And so when we talk about popular government, can we really describe it as a government of the people when a fraction of the people totally control the access to the vast majority? And that's what has to be challenged. And that's what has to be stood against. And to do that, we need not the party of accommodation, not the people who say, okay, we'll split the difference, we'll compromise this, compromise that. That's where we've gotten into the mess. Because the tax breaks that have come down the pike have come down with the assistance of key Democrats as well as the vast majority of Republicans. I'm sorry to tell you that. In 1986, there was a bill called, it was a Tax Simplification Act. It was supposed to bring about fairness and simplicity. Well, it reduced the tax rate on millionaires from 70 to 28%. And it created a special tax rate of 33% for people that made more than $45,000, up into $150,000. A pretty good definition of the middle class. Now, can you imagine maybe the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party going along with a bill that lowers the taxes on the richest people and increases it on the middle class? Because that's what's happening. And now if we look to Sacramento today, what's happening? The taxes that everybody's so excited about because they're finally going to get a budget, those are taxes on the people. They're regressive taxes. They're the sales tax. They're the energy tax, the candy tax. And then, of course, to add insult to injury, they go to defenseless children who are on assistance, and what do? They take $40 a month out of the miserable income that they have to live on. And we call that the party of opposition, the party of the people, the party of democracy. I tell you, my candidacy is not about getting along. It's about confronting the corrupt status quo that no longer represents the best interests of this state. And in that effort, I ask your help. Thank you very much.
Some closing remarks, and I don't know if Supervisor Ron Gonzalez is still with us. If you are, can you come up, Ron, to help set up the place for the event today? Thank all of you. With that, let me introduce Councilwoman Blanca Alvarado, who's the founder of the Latino Issues Forum. We'll give you a few brief comments.
Wonderful to be with our community, and I want to thank all of you for being here. But I think we all agree that Jerry Brown is more than just interesting and more than just unboring. Jerry Brown has not changed. He still has the same fire, the same passion, the same anger. He still tells it like it is. And I'm really pleased that he is here because I think that he tells us more than he just said in his final remark that he wants our help. What he is telling us, and what we know for a fact, is that we also have to have the same passion, the same anger, and that we also have to take the bull by the horns, because in fact in this country, in the last many years, we don't know who's a Democrat or who's a Republican anymore. We thought we had a two-party system, but in fact we have a one-party system in this country, and that has got to change. We are a community that has struggled day after day after day, endlessly for years, because we have been in pursuit of what is rightfully ours, and that is economic, social, educational, and political equity in this country. And nobody has given it to us, and nobody is going to give it to us, but we are going to have to give it to ourselves, which is exactly what we have done through the work of the Latino Issues Forum. Having Jerry Brown here today is no accident, because what we are heading for is an election season starting today and in days to come that requires each one of us to speak to the domestic issues that are being totally ignored, that are being totally bypassed by those in power. If the Latino Issues Forum and this community does not believe that it has to start working today to make our voices heard, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves. I am not suggesting that we have to join the Jerry Brown bandwagon, but I am suggesting that we have to be prepared to get out there and march in the streets again, and to use every form available and create some forms of our own to tell the story like it really is. I am fed up. I'm a member of the political community, but I'll tell you, like you, I am fed up with what I have seen, with what isn't being done. I am fed up with this shrugging of the shoulders that there's not enough money to address the problems that we're all concerned about. But as Jerry has said, there's plenty of money to build missiles or to create missiles and to bomb the hell out of people, but not enough money for us. We have got to change that. Nobody is going to change it, but we can, and we are destined to do that. I want to thank you, Jerry, for being here. You've been an inspiration. I will tell you that I have never forgotten Jerry Brown as a person whom I have admired as a community leader from my days when I worked with Ed Sandoval and the Mexican American Political Association. In fact, when Jerry was governor, our access to him was incredible. MAPA had its most profound experience during the time when Jerry was in Washington, in Sacramento. He's going to Washington. Jerry Brown demonstrated to us back there in the 70s that we are desperate for. This American society is desperate for honest leadership. We haven't had it. When Jerry Brown appointed Cruz Reynoso to the state Supreme Court, when he appointed Rose Byrd, when he created, those were very monumental occurrences. And they said a lot about the man. We're ready. We're ready. We're going to do our thing as well. We're ready to win. We're going to win with you.
And you'll be with me in Washington.
Thank you, Blanca. Supervisor Ron Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, and Governor Brown, we appreciate you being with us today. You've all been standing for a very long period of time, and you've heard some wonderful thoughts and dreams and visions for the future. Let me just say what I appreciate the most about Latino Issues Forum, and I certainly respect all of the elected officials who are here with us today, and that's wonderful. But I really believe that the strength of LIF is around you. And I want you to just take a moment and look around and look at the different age groups we have and the gender population mix here, and the fact that we have all different types of members of the Hispanic and Hispanic community and friends of the Hispanic community with us this afternoon. Let me just say that I believe the strength of the Latino Issues Forum is in you. You are the ones who carry out the mission of the Latino Issues Forum, and I think it's a very important message that you know that the general purpose and the primary purpose of LIF is that we determine as a community what issues we want to study. We're not asking to participate in someone else's study. For once, and for the first time in a long time, we are defining the issues that are important to our community. We are studying those issues together. We are resolving and coming to resolve the solutions that are necessary for our children, for our seniors, for our families, and for the future of our community. And then we take that message to whatever institution that's supposed to be doing that, and we get that institution to respond. So there is truth in the fact that there is strength in numbers, and we certainly have shown that in our very short history. That's the message that Blanca and George and I and Pete and others in the Latino Issues Forum are taking to corporate institutions here in Santa Clara County and the San Francisco Bay Area, because they're very interested in the concept of the Latino Issues Forum. This is not just another Latino organization that has bylaws. This is an organization that sets out a very specific agenda on a yearly basis and gets it done. And we want to congratulate you for that kind of participation. For those of you who have not participated at that same level but would like to, we strongly encourage you to get involved. Whether you're in the health field or the education field or job training or economic development or law enforcement or whatever your field may be, there are issues in your profession that are important to the Hispanic community, and we want you to be part of this process. We thank you for your attendance, we thank you for your support, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks.